When coming to the microphone, you will need to identify yourself and your relationship to the project. The commissioners will not ask any questions during your presentation. Your project should be presented in the following order: site plan, elevations, architectural details, and wall sections. Staff presents staff report. We will then ask for public comment. Following your presentation, the commissioners will be asking questions in the same order as the presentation. Please state and spell your name clearly if you're here to speak for or against a project. Your time will be limited to 3 minutes, so take some time now to summarize your comments because 3 minutes does go by quickly. Following public comment, the applicant will have 5 minutes for rebuttal. The public hearing will then be closed. Only comments which will be allowed after the public hearing is closed will be in response to any questions from the commissioners. The commissioners will then discuss the case and will make their decision based on the city ordinance, chapters 27 of the city zoning code, the design guidelines, the Secretary of Interior standards, the design review comments, and the testimony given at the public hearing. The BLC can only act on items that are within our specific jurisdictional responsibility. Owner agents are independently responsible to obtain any appropriate permits and or approvals. If you haven't already done so, please silence your cell phones. And I'd like to introduce the commissioners starting on my left.
Alex Andriakos.
Good morning, I'm Eric Schiller.
Good morning, Jose Jalotz.
Good morning, Liz Welch.
And with us today for staff, Dennis Fernandez, Ron Vila, Beverly Jusak, and legal, Kate Wells. We have the meeting minutes from November 19th, 2019. We need a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Second? Do we need a second?
Second.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, meetings are passed. Announcements.
Good morning, Commissioners. Dennis Fernandez, Architectural Review and Historic Preservation Manager. Welcome to the final public hearing of 2019. You should, by this time, have received your 2020 calendar with all the meeting dates. If not, please let a staff member know, and we'll send it to you so that you can reserve those dates for the public hearings throughout next calendar year. I do have the staff approvals to enter into the record. That is a routine kind of housekeeping item. But I did want to take a moment to welcome our newest commissioner, Commissioner Welch, who's in the real estate industry. We are, as I've said before, actively pursuing filling the vacancies on the board, and still have a couple of those. If anyone in the public is interested in learning more about those vacancies, they can contact the Historic Preservation Office, and we'll be happy to assist them. With that, we do have a full agenda this morning, so I'm going to ask Ron to come up and take care of the continuation so that we can move it forward. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Ron Vila. I'm staff with Historic Preservation. There's one continuation reflected on today's agenda, which is BLC 20-16 for the address of 1816 East 7th Avenue. It was requested by the agent to continue to January 28th, 2020 at 9 a.m. If we could get a motion for that, please.
Move to continue BLC 20-16 for the property located at 1816 East 7th Avenue as requested by the agent to the January 28, 2020 hearing.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
The next agenda item is ex parte communication and conflicts of interest. Ms. Wells.
Thank you. If I can ask commissioners if they have any conflicts of interest for matters that are scheduled this morning. No, see none. And if you've had any ex parte communications on any of the matters that are scheduled today, if they're verbal, if you could disclose the sum and substance of the communication and who you had it with, or if it's written, if you could introduce a copy of that written communication into the record. Seeing none. Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, we wish to swear in everybody that wishes to testify, including staff. Please stand up and raise your right hand. I do. Moving to the agenda items. The first agenda item is a comp plan amendment. it's 19-15, and the Barrio number is 20-05. And that is also connected to the second agenda item, which is BLC 19-46. At this time, I'd like the agent to come up and see how they wish to address those two items. They could either open them up separately or they could open up together.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commission members. My name is Mark Bentley, 401 East Jackson Street, Tampa, 33602. I represent the applicant, Nick Capitano Incorporated. And just a suggestion, however you want to handle it, but if we integrate the testimony of the two, the plan amendment and the CA, you might have a kind of a global picture. You know, it might be more coherent to approach it that way. So, but if you want to do them individually too, if we did them together, then you'd have to take separate action on both of them, obviously.
Does the comp plan affect the comp plan does affect the other? We can do it together, and let's focus on the comp plan first, so that
Sure.
we can get that out of the way when we vote, but set the table for the whole presentation.
Okay. Before I get going, I have some documents, primarily city codes and comp plan elements and recommendation I'd like to have received and filed. And then, Mr. Chairman, there's a representative from the Planning Commission who is a staff facilitator on the plan amendment, and also representative from the City of Tampa Planning Department. We gave a recommendation to the Planning Commission and to the Barrio. I don't know if you want to hear from them before I go.
We would, is there a staff presentation that precedes this?
Yeah, for procedure issues, let me go through and introduce the cases together, so it's on the record, and then I'll do a brief photo presentation as well to get you familiar with the site, and then Mr. Bentley could go into his presentation.
Thank you.
So as I stated, the first case that's reflected on the agenda is BLC 20-05/TA-CAP for the comp plan amendment, 19-15. That address is 1806 East 3rd Avenue. It's in the Ybor City Historic District. Currently, that's a vacant site, and you're asking for a recommendation, or they're asking for a recommendation from a GMU 24 to a UMU 60. The second case that's reflected, that's attached to this, is BLC 19-146 for the address of, there's a dual address there, there's an overlap. The first address is 1402 North 19th Street, and the overlap is 1806 East 3rd Avenue, which addresses the comp plan amendment. There is a contributing structure on the corner of that site. It was constructed in 1925, and the recommendation or the certificate of appropriateness that they're looking for is new construction for an apartment building, exterior renovations to the existing contributing structure, and site improvements. Attached to the certificate of appropriateness, you had reviewed that at a prior public hearing, which was October 22nd, 2019, and they received preliminary approval with some conditions that are reflected on page 4 of your staff report. I just wanted to bring to your attention that with the comp plan amendment, they have an influx of additional density here, so that preliminary approval has been altered. And that will be reflected on the presentation given to you. To get you familiar with the site, we like to start with a Sanborn map from 1929. Property highlighted in the green is what we're focusing on. It's on the corner of 19th Street, north is up, and 3rd Avenue. You have some historic structures that flank this site. You have Phillips Shore School to the east, and you have the Carawa Disco Cigar Factory to the south. There is a masonry block construction building that's attached to the certificate of appropriateness, and then this here is the comp plan amendment to the west of the contributing structure. That also shows up on this aerial. Once again, you have 19th Street and 3rd Avenue. This is on the corner. This is the contributing structure, and as part of the comprehensive plan for this whole site, you have the renovation and the addition to the historic structure, and then the recommendation for the GMU to a UMU on this empty parcel. Once again, this is the Carawa Disco, and this is the Philip Shore Complex. Moving to the contributing structure. This is the front elevation, which is the east elevation, which is on 19th Street. It's a 2-story structure with a balcony. The storefront has been enclosed, and then you have your gallery above. This is moving to the south elevation. You see this series of single windows that are stacked. You have your central banding and then your cornice on top. And this is the rear elevation, which is the west. This is where the addition will take place and then come towards the west as well. This is the empty parcel to the rear of the property. And this is a shot of that looking from 3rd Avenue. Series of character defining features on the structure. You see the concrete block that was used in 1925 that's pretty unique to Ybor City. You see the heavy sill underneath and the recess of the windows. These are not the original windows. This secondary means of egress was added some time ago, and it will be removed as part of this project. Focusing on the storefront, you have the iron columns that flank the central entrance. You have the transom above. And then just showing how the storefront was enclosed years ago in an inappropriate manner. Moving to the cornice and the details above. And how that cornice continues on the public elevation and then how it terminates towards the rear. This is the rear elevation here. And this is also a contributing structure, not part of this project, but this abuts it to the north. To get you familiar with the surrounding property, this is the cigar factory, the Carawa Disco, that is across 3rd Avenue to the south. Behind the vegetation is Philip Shore, and this is to the east. You see the brick streets and the granite curbing that's instrumental to the infancy of Ybor City. A couple of street shots. This is looking down 19th Street to the north, back towards 7th Avenue. And to conclude the photo presentation, just turning around, you have Philip Shore to the left. You have the Carawa Disco. This is looking down the historic brick street to the south, towards Adamo. That concludes the photo presentation. At this time, Mr. Bentley will address the board.
Thank you, Ron.
Okay, there are 2 other representatives, but if you want them to go later, that's fine, from the Planning Commission and City Planning Department, who rendered recommendations in connection with the case.
Let's proceed with your testimony, and then
Sure.
we'll bring the other folks
Okay.
up.
What we're seeking from the commission today is a recommendation under your jurisdiction to the Tampa City Council to determine that the proposed amendment maintains the integrity and character of the historic district. And I'm paraphrasing that criterion in your case here. The other recommendations are based on other review agencies to Tampa City Council. For example, FDOT, transportation, stormwater, landscape, things like that, natural resources, that determine that the proposed plan amendment is consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the City of Tampa Comprehensive Plan. So that's how they weighed in on it. And just for purposes of clarification, at the time of preliminary review, what was presented to the Barrio, and it was difficult to ascertain because I don't even think they were dealing with square footages more or less at the time, was about 20,000 square feet on the subject property. And, excuse me, 15,000. What's proposed today is in the ballpark of 20,000. And I'll get into specifics. The intent of the plan amendment is to incorporate the property that Ron showed you, owned by the Levine family, located to the west, to the east on 19th Street. The existing land use designation for the subject property is GMU 24, which allows a floor area ratio of 1.5. And a little bit about the GMU is the city came up with this classification in the 90s and applied it to certain areas of the city to allow development in kind of a holding pattern and didn't want to create any nonconformities. So you only see GMU 24, say around Rome Avenue north of Kennedy and Ybor City. So it's contemplated that eventually, when there's a specific plan of development, the GMU 24 would be changed to the appropriate land use category. And that's in the comprehensive plan. Actually, it says, quote, "It is expected that these GMU areas will transition to development that is compatible with surrounding neighborhoods." So it's kind of a holding category. And before I elaborate on why the amendment is necessary, I'd like to mention that the proposed amendment has received unanimous support from numerous agencies as it furthers the goals, objectives, and policies in the comp plan. These include the Planning Commission staff, expressed its support in its lengthy staff report to the Planning Commission, which is part of the record today. Also, the City of Tampa Planning staff and the Planning Commission on November 18th, 2019, at its public hearing unanimously recommended approval of the plan amendment to the Tampa City Council. And likewise, the Barrio Latino staff, and you have a copy of their staff report. So you have numerous professional opinions concluding that the proposed amendment is reasonable and desirable and allows the type of density and intensity sought for Ybor City, which is characterized under the comprehensive plan as an urban village, which suggests higher densities in this area. There are two specific policies out of several that kind of stick out that were used by the Planning Commission as justification for approval. And one is policy 9.4.1 of the future land use element of the comprehensive plan. And that states, encourage higher density multifamily development in pedestrian-oriented urban areas with access to transit, a broad range of services and amenities, and access to employment. And promote high-density residential development in business centers and urban village. And this property is, like I said, an urban village. And also objective 9.6 of the future land use element, it states that promote a residential development pattern consistent with the compact cities form strategy with increased availability of housing at densities that promote walking and transit use near employment concentrations, residential services, and amenities. Notably, not only is the property to the east part of the proposed project that will be discussed today with the companion CA, it's also, which is UMU 60, also the property to the south is already UMU 60. And I'd like to mention that the subject property is zoned YC6, and it's the same zoning as the property that's incorporated into the project owned by Levine's to the east. They're both YC6, so there won't be any zoning changes. The only change to facilitate redevelopment of these properties is what we're dealing with today, this land use amendment. So what I'd like to show you So we call this parcel D, that's Levine, and that's almost 9,000 square feet. Then Capitano, the subject, is 10,000 square feet. So with the FAR allowed under the GMU 24 category, right now on the Capitano piece, you could have up to 15,000 square feet. And on the Levine property, since it's already UMU 100, has an FAR of 3.25, it would allow a little over 29,000 square feet. So the project that's going to be presented as part of the CA is actually 42,000 square feet. So when you integrate the two, right now as we speak, there's plenty of square footage. The hiccup is under the city's comp plan, they don't allow transfer of entitlements from contiguous properties, notwithstanding that they're one unified development. Now in the county, they do, okay? And I think that's problematic, and I'll save that for a later day in front of the Planning Commission. So really, that's the problem we're trying to work around. So right now, there's a total of 44,204 square feet allowed between the two lots. The proposed development under the CA is 42,435, so combining the lots appears to be sufficient to achieve the project square footage by about 2,000 square feet. So on parcel E, we're developing 21,510 square feet, which is 73% of the entitlement of 29,204. And D, we're developing 20,925, which is a 2.1 FAR. So overall, the overall project square footage will be 42,435. It's lower than the 44,204 allowed between the two properties as we speak. If we could transfer 6,000 square feet available from E to D, we wouldn't be here today, and that's the situation. So the overall FAR will be significantly under what would be allowed under the UMU in combination, which would be 61,000 square feet. So we're about 60% of the potential entitlements between the two properties. So we're simply just trying to shift some of that square footage surplus from Levine over to Capitano. So that's the situation. The land use change would allow a project whose scale and massing would be compatible and consistent with the development pattern in the area. Even taking our project out of the analysis, all staffs and the Planning Commission have determined that the UMU 100 is compatible with the area and is the appropriate land use designation that will preserve the historical integrity of this area of the historic district. And that's pretty much it in a nutshell. If you have any questions, I'll gladly try to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. If we could hear, is it appropriate to bring up testimonial at this point?
I believe Mr. Garcia is going to add to this presentation, so you have a complete presentation in front of you, and then at that time you could ask for city staff and the Planning Commission if you have any questions for them.
Okay, thank you.
Can you please bring up the PowerPoint presentation? Hello, my name is Fali Garcia. I'm a principal at Open Workshop for Architecture. I will go through only the first part of my presentation that relates to Mark's presentation as well, just for clarification, and then we can jump on to the full project presentation. Okay. This slide was already presented to you guys. As you see below is the previous maximum FAR, which is what was used to develop the project previously. The original application proposed a 44,000 square foot building. When we came in front of you last time, when we received our preliminary approval, we actually had a total building square footage of roughly 33,000 square feet. In light of the new recommendation by the planning staff, we've gone back and reworked the building slightly. It didn't really change much. It was the rear of the building that was slightly altered. And so we created this slide to show what the difference was between what was presented in the previous presentation and what we will be presenting today. At the bottom is the previous facade, rear facade, and you can see on the right it's a diagram, a plan diagram of what was presented. As you can see, there was a chunk of the building that was taken out at the rear from floors 2 to 5. So that added up to about 5,000 square feet on the lot, on the Capitano's lot. Today we are kind of filling in that gap. But you end up in the facade design, it's pretty much the same thing. So this is just kind of a clarification, and the difference between what was presented before and what will be presented today. So I can stop it here and then we can pick up again once we hear from the staff.
Thank you. Again, Ron Vila, I'm staff with Historic Preservation. I wanted to open the cases up together because I believe the additional information was very important for you to understand where this project was going, where it has been and where it was going. The recommendation and your powers and duties today are under Section 2795 in the City of Tampa Code, A2H. And on page 3 of the staff report, this recommendation needs to focus on, with regards to the application for the rezoning, land use change classifications, or comprehensive plan amendment, to review and recommend reasonable land use changes to the extent necessary to preserve the historic integrity and appearance. It's staff's position that this project received preliminary approval prior. The additional density is plugged into the rear in a nondescript elevation. The street and the public perception is not modified in a negative manner, so we support the intensity bonus for the recommendation from the GMU 24 to the UMU 60. As I stated earlier, we have Ms. Anthony from the planning with the City of Tampa, and we have Mr. Collins with the Planning Commission here to address any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from the commissioners? To the left? No question?
No question.
No question.
No questions.
Mr.
Couple
Chairman,
questions.
I don't know if you'd like to hear from Ms. Anthony and Mr. Collins as part of the presentation?
We would.
Okay.
And I'd like to get my questions into the record so that they can address them as they go.
Thank you.
So, in terms of what we saw on the past preliminary approval, because we have a preliminary CA attached to the project, is it my understanding that the FAR that was on the land use did not support that initial design?
No, the initial design fell within the FAR. The difference was that the combined FAR between the two lots amounted to 44,000 square feet, or roughly a little bit more than that. The hiccup, as Mark was saying, was that most of that square footage was within the Levine's property, which is that irregular L-shaped lot.
Right.
Because we don't want to add any additional stories to the existing building or create kind of an L-shaped building behind the other building next to it, we created that kind of volume next to the existing building, except that in order to spread the 44,000 square feet, you have to go through either PD rezoning approval, which we did not want to do. So at the time of the presentation, the last time, we designed the building so that the portion that was within the Capitano's lot did meet the FAR that's currently on the site. So that's why we had that chunk kind of taken out of the rear of the building before.
Okay. And with the new density, because you're filling in some gaps there and providing more units. I know that we were asking last time about parking. That was a concern. What does the request that you're doing, although we have a preliminary approval for what the building looks like, we should also be concerned about what the additional density will do to the neighborhood.
Yeah,
does that work?
since our last presentation, we were in the process of a design exception for an alternate parking lot. Since that has been approved for 48 parking spaces, we are proposing 47 units. So we do meet the 1-to-1 ratio parking as required by the City of Tampa.
Okay, thank you. And with that, if we could hear from the other experts.
Good morning.
Morning.
Danny Collins with the Planning Commission. Kind of briefly go over presentation. Okay, so the subject site, it's in the central Tampa Planning District. It's in the historic Ybor neighborhood, and within the Ybor City Urban Village, which is recognized in the comprehensive plan. This is an aerial of the subject site and the surrounding properties. It's on East 3rd Avenue. This is North 19th Street. This is Adamo Drive, North 17th Street, and this is Philip Short School. Just a background, this is privately initiated, small-scale amendments. It's approximately just under a quarter acre. It's from the GMU 24 category to the UMU 60. This is the current adopted future land use map. You'll see the subject sites here. It's in that GMU 30, GMU 24. To the north, you'll see the CC 35 and some CMU 35. And then to the west, you'll see some UMU 60. To the south, industrial. Further to the south along Adamo Drive. This is the proposed future land use. If it were to be approved, this is what the proposed map would look like. Basically, the proposed amendment would allow for an increase in development potential by allowing higher residential density and greater commercial intensity. Currently, the site could be considered for 5 units. As proposed under the UMU 60, it could be considered for 13 potential units. And also, it would allow an increase in intensity on the site. The Planning Commission reviewed the request. We found that it was consistent with several of the comp plan goals and objectives, specifically under the city planning strategy, under development and urban villages. It was consistent with a lot of several of the neighborhood policies and housing policies. Based on those considerations, the Planning Commission voted and found the request consistent with comprehensive plan. And I'll be here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Collins while he's there? Thank you.
Good morning, Tawanda Anthony, Planning and Development. The request from GMU 24 to UMU 60, city staff did find it consistent, as well as all other city reviewing agencies, and we're available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody from the public that wants to speak for or against this particular request? Seeing none, we can close this portion of the hearing and move to discuss the case as commissioners. So, discussion?
No discussion.
I have no discussion.
Seems pretty easy. Okay, so it looks, and perhaps you can help me out here again. It seems like you had the you get the advantage of a larger FAR. We're not changing the overall proportions of the building. We're infilling a little bit on the backside to take advantage of some of the additional density that you're allowed. But the massing scale and character of the proposed, what we're about to open up, is the same. There's no additional retention that you're doing. We have the parking accommodated.
Mr. Chairman, would you like to reopen the hearing? I don't know if your comment is in the nature of a question to the applicant.
It's rhetorical.
Okay. He stood up, so I wasn't sure. Thank you.
So I think that, in my understanding is that this is a recommendation from the BLC to the city to allow this to move forward. So we have the opportunity to make a recommendation. And I think that we have the opportunity for a motion.
I move to recommend City Council approve BLC 20-05/TA-CPA 19-15 for the property located at 1806 East 3rd Avenue for the proposed rezoning from GMU-24 to UMU-60 with no conditions because of the testimony presented here at the public hearing, and it is consistent with Section 27-95A2H of the City of Tampa Code of Ordinances.
We have a motion that requires an amendment.
Just a clarification, rather than a rezoning, this is an amendment to the comprehensive plan.
We have a motion. Okay. We have a motion with a clarification accepted. We need a second.
Seconded.
Second. There's no conditions attached, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Recommendation approved.
At this time, we'll continue, because we opened both of the cases. This is BLC 19-146 for the address of 1402 North 19th Street and 1806 East 3rd Avenue. So he provided partial information, and he's going to go through a more thorough presentation for the certificate of appropriateness.
Could we bring up the presentation again? All right, now that we've gone through the first part, I will go through the rest of the presentation. I know some of you were not here the last time, so I'll just go ahead and kind of do the whole presentation from the beginning. So this is the, here it is. This is the site NS. So the site is composed of, again, 1, 2 lots for the building. Oh, sorry. Thank you. 1, 2 lots for the building.
I'm sorry, but before you launch into your presentation, I just want to restate and refresh that you have a preliminary approval through the commission for the project. So with that in mind, if there are deviations that you've undertaken, if there are specific responses that you have provided for our comments last time, let's focus on those so that we don't have to go backwards in the process.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's no deviations other than what we had presented before with that portion of the building at the rear. Everything else is pretty much the same. The site plan is the same as we had presented before, and the only difference from the preliminary approval is that we now have a approval for the alternate parking lot within 500 feet of the site. There was a, can we please bring the presentation back up? Yeah. There is no change to the footprint other than some minor modifications. On the previous presentation, we had a only one ADA parking space on the site. We've I know there was some concerns about that, so we were able to include a second ADA parking space on the building site, and then there's a third one on the adjacent lot as well. Everything else in regards to the footprint of the building remained the same. We've added a more thorough landscape plan, which is also shown on the civil site plan over here. The landscape plan includes all the new credits and debits as required for the City of Tampa, as well as the native versus non-native trees. The only non-native tree I think we have is the crepe myrtle that we are kind of putting actually on both lots. We're still proposing to save the grand oak that's behind the property. So if there's any more questions about the landscape, we can kind of revisit this later. For the rehabilitation of the building, before we were actually proposing to do new openings on the front facade. We have now reworked the plan so that's no longer needed. So we're actually reusing all the existing openings. The only thing that we're doing is we're getting rid of the fire escape, and we're also getting rid of the awning there along 3rd Avenue, and we're converting that door into a window. Some of the features of this building that we're saving are again, the windows, which we're going to come back with a Barrio approved window design to mimic and respect the original architecture. We are also bringing back the original storefront. This new plan design allowed us to keep the storefront at the same 0 lot line because we're no longer using them as means of egress. The main mean of egress now is changing to the south along 3rd Avenue, which we're sacrificing one of the window openings, and that would be your main entrance there for this building, or for the existing building. Meaning the main entrance for the overall site would be somewhere else. We are refurbishing the existing balcony and some of the other exterior detailing as the cornice, the cornice at the top, and fixing some of the facade exterior wall partitions. We've started the encroachment process with the City of Tampa as well. There's a concern about utilities and the front, the balcony. We are in conversation with the engineers at TICO. We don't believe there's going to be any issues. The main concern from TICO is the proximity of the lines and how much voltage is going through those lines to the building, and their minimum distance is 8 feet, which the main lines are actually well beyond that, above the building. The one power pole that you see to the right of the screen is actually the power servicing the building. So they don't really anticipate any issues here, but we're still kind of going through that process, and we'll depending on what whether it's approved or disapproved, then we can handle that with your staff at that point. This is a demo plan for the interior as it was requested. We are, for the most part, gutting the building. The main the roof, we still don't know the exact condition of the roof. We're gonna try to save some of the existing structure on the roof, but the second floor might be in beyond salvageable condition. So we'll probably gut that and do a new layout inside. And the elevation, as I mentioned before, we're getting rid of all the windows, replacing them with new. On the front facade, we're getting rid of. We're going to change the roof of the existing balcony and replace or refurbish the guardrail system, and replacing also. We're going to remove the boarded up storefront. Some of the character-defining elements of the building that we are salvaging or reconstructing are the storefront doors, the balconies. There's the steel column details. We're salvaging those as well. And then on the interior, there's some iron columns that we are going to save and reuse in some of these units. The color palette will be consistent with what's already there. Luckily, the building adjacent to it gave us some insight as to what this building used to be. So we were able to take cues from that. We're gonna use greens and the beige, which is already present, and we're gonna use lights that are consistent with the existing architecture. Here are the new facades for the existing building. As you can see there on the south elevation, down at the bottom right of the screen, you see how we sacrifice that one window and create a threshold to provide the main means of egress to the building, to that portion of the building. And here's again a wall section of the structure and the new rendering to the side of what this building will look like. Now, moving on to the new structure. First, let me go kind of quickly through the plan. The areas highlighted in blue are designated for the units, and the areas highlighted in red are the public spaces and amenity spaces for the building. I know there was a concern in the past at the corner of the existing building between 3rd and 19th. There was a concern about that being a unit and whether or not there was privacy needed, and it was going to affect the transparency of the glass. We've since converted that space into the amenity space for the building. It's more of a public nature, so we think it's programmatically, it relates better to the public realm. The second floor of the project to the left, which is the new structure, those units at the bottom are loft-style units which have direct access to 3rd Avenue. We've done this to promote the pedestrian access and walkability of the street and kind of activate the streetscape a little more. And as we move to the other floors, the common floors, this is 3rd and 4th floor would be the same. And your 5th floor, which should be slightly set back at the top. And here's our roof plan with a new mechanical layout. We worked with our engineers to figure out the most efficient layout for these mechanical units and exhaust fans. Due to the nature of the high parapet of the existing building, the units will not be seen from anywhere in the street. And due to the height of the new structure and the small size of each of the split system units, you would actually have to be close to 2,000 feet away from the building to even see anything on the roof. We'll have a diagram of that later on showing that view site. Here are some of the local inspirations that we use to drive the design of the new structure, and which also set our goals for the project. The most prevalent is the Corral building across the street. This is our neighboring building, so we use this to really drive the rhythm and pattern of our facade, as well as the massing for the new building. Down at the bottom of the screen, bottom left, we have the Phillips School, which, again, we were able to use that to the existing building being 2 stories and Phillips School being 2-story in scale. They both relate, which originally we were thinking about adding a 3rd floor to that building. We stepped back from that approach to stay more consistent with the streetscape. And we've also went around Ybor City to draw additional inspiration in how to articulate the facades. Here's the new facade of the building. As you can see, there's the window pattern. We've split the building into 2 sections. The bottom 2 stories are your loft units. The top portion of the building we are treating with a combination of brick and stucco. The brick color is different from what was presented before. I know that was a point of concern. We've brought samples, and we also have some local examples of the district of similar brick that we're proposing to use. using again the kind of the loft pattern at the bottom has helped us break the building facade a little bit as well to have a more relatable scale. Here's the rear facade, again a combination of stucco or cementitious material and the brick, following the same pattern. On our previous meeting, it was brought up that we needed additional details for the east and west facades. These are the east facade. We're wrapping some of the same detailing along that was shown on the south facade. And then the most challenging facade is really the west facade, because that is most likely going to share a property line with a future adjacent building. So there are some fire safety concerns there. So, but we're articulating this facade with the materiality, and again bringing back some of the same patterns from the south facade. At the top, we are still proposing to do windows at the 5th floor, and we will address the proper detailing for that with fire marshals to make sure that we are meeting the City of Tampa code for that. Here are the two buildings side by side. I'm not sure if we presented something like this on the previous presentation. And then the next slide will show some of the alignments that we're bringing across. Again, alignments from the existing building that kind of drove some of the design decisions for the new building. As you can see at the bottom, we're matching the window sills. We're matching the second line up. We're matching the window heads. The second line up is the window trim not the window trim, but the existing trim of the building. We're bringing it across and matching that with the mullions of the storefront. And again, from the right to left, we have the window sills to the bottom of the beam or trim for the new building. And then at the top, you'll see that the top of the parapet aligns with the kind of the fenestration detailing that we have on the building. We looked at the awning. There was a comment in the previous presentation to possibly raise the awning to meet the third line up from the existing building. We looked at that, and we assessed the project at that point, and the awning is really not that big. It's only it's really not that wide or big, so the higher it gets, the less protection it provides. And but we were still able to match the bottom of the awning again to the window heads there. So we thought this would be a more functional approach to the awning location. We did present this in the past. Again, I thought it was important to show how we use the building across to kind of drive our design on this project. Here's the west facade, again, the most challenging facade on this project, and in comparison to some of the projects around the area. And we looked at the area to see how some other projects were handling that zero lot line condition. So we're kind of matching that. Again, we're wrapping the brick roughly 3 feet, which is, again, it's consistent with some of the other projects, historic buildings around the district. Both in the rear and the front, but more in the rear, we have some of the stucco detailing or integral stucco. And again, to the left, you see some of the district samples of how that would be dealt with. Here's the building that we use as reference to drive our brick selection, and this is the building located at 17th and 7th. And we have sample of the brick too here as well, if you guys would like to see that closely. Some of the detailing that we will be using on the building, again, the guardrail will match the design for the existing building. The handles and light fixtures, again, are reminiscent of, again, some of the design patterns along the district. Here's the Ybor City color palette. This is the palette we're using. Again, we're trying to pick colors that are complementary to each other for the overall project. And we thought this was an important slide to show all building facades side by side, so you can see that each building has its own its own integrity, and you can see also the how they relate to each other. As we've further developed some building sections, and I think it might be better to show in drawings here. This is one of the requests from our previous meeting. And I know that there was a question about how both buildings met, the transition of how both buildings met, and then also just to see let me get the pointer here. The first 2 floors of the building would be a concrete structure. It would be a wood frame construction above that with a brick facing. The brick facing allows us to have a deeper threshold for the windows as you move up. And then you can see here as the building steps back at the top, this top piece will be the stucco portion of the building. On this page, we can see how the 2 buildings meet. Because the first 2 floors are concrete, we can, at this junction, just cantilever the slab. So really, this building is structurally independent of the existing building. So it's a very delicate connection between the 2. Back to the presentation. Here's our diagram. This is 50 feet away from the building. Again, the units only stick up about 44 inches above the parapet. So you can see they won't be visible. And here's the updated rendering of the project. This is a further detailing, and you see the brick color, how it complements it's within the same color family of the beige. It's got more brown tones to it as well. And that's the end of my presentation, so I'll open it up for questions.
Thank you.
Just to complete his presentation, I know he has some samples here. I'd like for him to put them into the record, to go through them item by item and address it with the board.
Thank you.
We brought a sample of, I'm sorry, these things are a little heavy. Hold on. Yeah.
You talk, I got it.
Okay. So we've got, well, here are the paint samples. This is the paint samples for both the existing building. Sorry, this is the example for the existing building. So this would be our beige with our green side by side. And then here's the materiality for the new building. Now all together, again, they are pretty complementary materials. So yeah, this is too much. Again, a sample of the storefront that will be used. This would be mainly for the first 2 floors of the building, for the loft units. And then we'll use a vinyl window product, which would be black on the outside, white on the inside. And again, common issue with these windows are that usually they're pretty flat, but we're taking care of that issue because we're adding onto the front of the facade to create that threshold. And then this is kind of the scale of the intermediate rods that we're planning on doing for the guardrails. Oh, and then yeah, of course, the integral color stucco on this side. This down. This is a sample we had made to show what the intent for the stucco would be. This is a variation. there's variation in that material, so it's not flat. So I think that kind of concludes the materials.
Thank you.
Commissioners, Ron Vila, staff with Historic Preservation. It was a very complete and thorough presentation. Staff's finding that the application is consistent with the Ybor City Design Guidelines. From the prior public hearing, there were 4 conditions that were attached, and they're reflected on page 4 of your staff report. They were satisfied through the presentation. Then the additional conditions that staff, in working with the agent and the owner to get to this point through the presentation, the majority of those items had been addressed through the presentation. I just wanted to call out some additional discussion items. The final location for the solid waste, I know they talked about it before, but solid waste is something that through this very thorough design process, a lot of time ends up at the end having a negative impact on the project. So I wanted him to go through that one more time to show the location on the site plan. The encroachments can be a lengthy process. He's already started that, so hopefully at the time of permitting that those processes come to termination together. To talk about the hardscape around the project, this is for the public experience as you go around from the curbing all the way in to the facades that are zero lot line, to call out those materials as well. To discuss if there's any fencing on what I'm going to call the home site with the contributing structure and the new construction, and then at the satellite site for the parking. To meet the surface parking within the city of Tampa and Ybor City, you have to have a perimeter fence. We have examples of what that fencing shall look like. We have the throat coming in, the apron, and the drive aisle has to be a hard dustless surface. So for him to address those items. And then the parking stalls themselves can be turf. They're indicated with the wheel stops. So I don't know if he wants to put any signage on that satellite site to incorporate it to the home site, and if there's any signage at the home site as well, should be discussed. The last item, well, there's 2 items. The last item, he expressed the introduction of the windows on the new construction, but the replacement windows on the contributing structure should be wood windows to meet the Secretary of Interior standards. I think that needs to be discussed, and if he doesn't have an example, I think that could be delegated to the staff. We have a variety of windows that have been approved in the past. And then pending approval through City Council for the first part of this presentation, I believe it's in January 30th, that has to go through, that plan amendment has to receive approval for this to move forward as well. So I'd put that as a condition. I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ron.
I can address some of Ron's additional items, which we do have, but we just didn't talk about them on the presentation. Yeah. No, it's better than the site. Most of them are site related. Actually, yeah, can we bring the PowerPoint up again real quick? In regards to the fencing, we are proposing fencing along around the adjacent parking lot, and on our side as well. The fencing will meet the Ybor City design standards. So we'll make sure that if as that develops further, we get feedback from your staff as well to make sure that still keeps meeting the design guidelines there. In terms of the retention, you see at the top of the adjacent parking, we do have a shallow area of retention area at the top right of the lot, and then on the building lot, we will have an underground vault, and you can see the outline there. Maybe I can point it out on the site plan here. The outline is in this area here would be dedicated for an underground vault for the retention there. In terms of signage, we are going to have very small signage on the building, on the new building. It would be either eventually the building name and address, most likely isolated to the awning area, and then there will be there'll probably be obviously there will be signage on the adjacent lot. It would be a secure lot, and so we'll make sure that signage design also meets the Ybor City design standards. As I said before, we did start the encroachment process, so we're in the process of that. We don't foresee any problems with that. The biggest issue is going to be that front balcony. We do have a small encroachment on the new building, which is the entrance awning, but the feedback that we're getting is that that's not really going to be that big of a deal. We've made sure that the footprint of that encroachment is only 4 feet for that awning, and it's cantilevered. So other than that, we have your typical 6 to 8 inches for the building trim. Again, it's just the nature of the building being at a 0 lot line, and it's at a 0 lot line because, again, we're trying to stay consistent with the adjacent building, with the existing building, which is also at 0 lot line. And I think that addressed most of the concerns from Ron.
Yes, thank you. So we have the opportunity for public comment if there is anybody here to speak regarding this project. Seeing none, we'll move to commissioners' questions, starting on my right this time.
Okay, there was one issue that Ron raised that I don't think you addressed, was the solid waste. Okay. Did he go further into that, or was Ron asking for further clarification? I'm not sure. And then the only other question I had is, I understand you're meeting your required parking requirements, but in these denser buildings, I'm just wondering, do you have any space, or are you providing for any kind of additional, like, bike storage convenient to residents at the ground level, or scooters? There's all sorts of new ways to get around the city, and it'd be nice if you could incorporate a safe place for those within the property. And then the question I had, and it might be best addressed to Ron, but Ron mentioned if you could address the fact that the historic structure would require replacement wood windows. And then the question for Ron, from me, is would the historic structure also require a storefront made out of wood?
That's correct. In the past, we've been successful with meeting the building code, with putting a more contemporary storefront and then cladding it in a wood product. So that's what's been coming up recently. So additional information on the storefront will be required at the time of permitting.
Okay. So I guess there was a question there just about the biking and thoughts about the storefront on the historic building.
In regards to the solid waste, we do have a rollout dumpster. That was something that was kind of figured out at the very early stages during the HDRC. That came back as a comment from the HDRC. So that will be a rollout dumpster, and there will be a staff member that will be in charge of making sure that gets rolled out, and trash pickup days. In terms of the bike rack, yes, definitely we will have bike rack somewhere along both lots, actually. So we, as we get further also in the design of the units, we want to make sure that there's actual space inside the units for bicycle. We understand this is more of an urban type design project, so that's going to be very important, especially with the development around the area, promoting the use of bicycles and scooters. And then the windows. I know there's a couple of local fabricators as well as some companies that do provide options for wood windows and doors. And it's, as Ron said, it's a hybrid system. Sometimes the exterior cladding would be wood so that it maintains the same character. Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, done.
Okay.
I'd like to talk about the storefront just a little bit more. It seems that for engineering purposes and all over the district, we've approved aluminum storefronts because of wind loading. So what you're saying is, and I guess this is to Ron, what you're saying is you're gonna put an aluminum, but it's gonna be wood-clad aluminum. Is that right?
So there is wood systems and hybrid systems that both meet the Florida building code wind load for this area. Regardless of what we use, we're going to have to meet those standards, whether it has a Florida product approval number attached to it or if it's signed and sealed by a local engineer. Either way, it's going to have to meet the wind load requirements.
See, but you just said regardless of what we use, and that part of that decision rests here. So I'm guessing is aluminum, would aluminum be acceptable if that was the only system that would meet the wind loading, because that's what we've been doing?
Let me clarify. When I say regardless, it could be an all-wood system or a hybrid system with a wood exterior.
And do you know for a fact that an all-wood system will meet the wind loading?
I mean, I don't want. I mean, I'm pretty sure they do, but you know, we'll have to look into that for sure.
Well, I guess what we've been told is the all-wood system won't.
Okay.
Unless I'm mistaken.
Okay. It depends on the height of the doors as well, and the systems that are supporting it. You know, again, I guess what I'm trying to get at is that the design of the doors will have a wood exterior, and you know it's going to have to meet the wind load. So that's just an issue that will be addressed as we detail the project further.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No questions.
Okay, let's see, a couple questions for you. In terms of you have an example of the stucco, that's the integral color, but would it be different colors for the darker stucco that you're talking about, or is that just a texture example, or is that?
Yeah, no, there would be two colors. So this would be the gray would be an integral stucco color, and then you have a darker one that would be used for the top of the building and then the rear of the building.
Okay, I think that that'll be something we want staff to work with you on, since we don't have it with us today.
The dark we do
we
have.
have the dark one?
Yeah, the dark we do have the dark here. It's just a smaller.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so this would be.
Okay. Okay, we have it. So we talked about the stucco color. On the rendering for the existing building where we're punching a new door in for a window, you've altered the floor plan, and even on your landscape plan, you show what my question is, which is why aren't we using the existing storefront openings along the east side of the property as the access points for the building?
I just want to make sure I understand the question. You're asking why we're using this storefront as access?
You've indicated in this particular proposal and presentation that we have to cut in a new door on the south facade of that existing building, southeast corner, and for egress. And you've also indicated that you've abandoned the notion of the unit that's right along the east facade. When you look at the plans here for the landscape, you see the alternate approach that you had, which doesn't have that door, it appears, and has, and there's a fire stair, and then there's some existing doors there. So I guess my question is, do we have to cut that door in, or can we use the access to the east in order to make that happen?
So we want to make sure that, we want to keep I think keeping doors here is important, but the doors will swing in rather than out, which if before they were swinging out, so we had to recess the door so that it didn't interfere with the public right of way.
So you've got a recessed vestibule in that stair
If
discharge?
yeah, so here we have to recess it so that
Okay.
the door doesn't open out into the public right of way. Yeah.
Okay. And so on the north facade, if we can look at that,
The north facade, yeah.
since this one's been modified a little bit since we.
Oh wait, I'm going to the beginning. Actually, here's the north facade portion in relationship to what was before. I guess that this might be
Right.
better to
Do you
look at.
have a different? I guess my comment here for the north facade is the south facade is the one that it seems like he's been spending a lot of time on. You know, it's obviously the one that it's the project, and I like in terms of the massing and the proportion that you've been able to establish there, the loft units floors 1 and 2 are legible there, and then we get around the backside and they become illegible as part of the facade. And I guess my challenge to you, if we want to put it in the motion, would be to is there a way to express the loft units on the back similar to the front, so that we have just the brick band at floors 3 and 4 rather than 2, 3, and 4?
Yeah, let me bring this. Let's bring the drawings up here again. I'm going to go through the section real quick first. So the loft unit,
Yes.
the entrance, so the loft unit, the entrance down here, foot above the sidewalk. This area, which would be the kind of the living room space,
Right.
it's a double height space. The loft kind of does an L-shaped,
Yes.
and then goes over the parking, and then what you end up with at the rear is the bedroom. It hasn't quite been, the interior hasn't been finalized, but this would be a bedroom space. There is an opportunity to articulate this facade, this portion of the facade a little bit different here, just this bottom portion, which when you bring back the elevations would be this banding here. We could treat that a little bit different. But, again, so that would relate more to the other side. I'm not sure that down at the parking level area we can do much. I mean, we have our structure there, and in terms of the facade that's recessed, again, we didn't think that was a good space for windows, since you'd be looking directly at cars from inside the unit. So, it could certainly be articulated a little bit further, but
I think that I guess the point of the question is, and you can see it there in those two facades. The south facade is very articulated, very developed, very refined, very legible in terms of the massing and the intent, from the retained historic structure to the loft apartments to the massing of the brick above, and then the final story, which kind of lessens the massing on the top. Then you flip it to the backside and it changes character a little bit. I think that that you have the opportunity to bring that clarity that you see on the bottom of the elevation to the backside there. And this facade here is kind of catching up with the rest of the project because of the kind of the difference or changing the amount of units that you have in there and
Right.
figuring it out. So.
we did run into one issue, because originally we were thinking about that, and if you see this banding here, which most of it is structural, as it wraps around the building, comes in at this level here. When you bring this across,
You can see it in the section.
you can see it in the section too. Yeah, it cuts the windows.
Yeah.
And you end up with a very, if we kind of bring that across, for example, as a datum on the building, it cuts the windows short. So we had a decision to make there, so do we make the windows similar to the top, or do we articulate that a little bit different? So, this was kind of a natural, we're using the brick to kind of stop that, the trim piece and have it somewhere to end in the building. So, I guess with these things, there's no right answer. It's always better or worse, so this is kind of how we ended up with the
Sure.
with that, yeah.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the input, and I think that you've had the opportunity to kind of play along with us as we've been going in terms of answering the questions. So with that, we can, I think, close the public hearing. Oh, one more question?
Yeah, sorry, I just forgot one more question. It's just a comment. I appreciate that you've given us the drawing that takes the project from the historic building to the new construction, but it's just an observation on your sections where you're actually physically attaching the two. The head height, based on what appear to be the lines of the second floor, don't seem like they make sense. It's too low. Have you really studied that?
That's a point. That's a point in conjunction between the two buildings. Right now we're at the minimum 7'6" between, like, right at that threshold, and then you ramp down.
Right.
We have an issue with the existing building. That second floor is abnormally high. So to make, there's 3 different floor levels at that connection, but that's going to get studied further. Since we're gutting the building, we're going to look at possibly lowering that floor a little bit more so we can gain a little bit more.
Is there any reason why you just wouldn't make it higher?
If we make it higher, we have to, we want to make sure that these units, some of the character of the buildings in Ybor City are your typical high ceilings. And, right now, we are planning to have over 9-foot ceilings in some of these units. If we pop that 3rd floor up a little higher, it would make it different than the other 2 floors, and on top of that, it would actually shrink the ceiling height of that 3rd floor to an 8-foot high ceiling. Again, we are at the maximum height of the overall building, so we have to work within that overall height. It's something that we're going to keep developing, and we certainly work with your staff with both this issue and the same as the elevation issue as well.
Well, I appreciate that there are issues that will come up during construction that obviously we'll have to go back to staff, but it's also important that this is our last chance to see the project.
Right.
So we'll probably want to condition that for final staff approval, since it is such an important literal connection between the 2 projects.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so we'll close the public hearing.
Mr.
and-
Chairman,
yes.
maybe before you close, if you want to give the applicant an opportunity for rebuttal, just given the questions that have been presented. I realize there was no public comment, but.
Right.
I think we've answered all the questions, so, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for tagging along.
Yeah.
Let's see, so we'll close the public hearing, discuss the case. Any comments or?
No comments.
No discussion.
I think it's been an incredibly comprehensive and coherent presentation, and really appreciate that, because it is a complex project.
I would agree. I have no comment.
Okay. So, I agree, and I think that there are components that we're gonna have to delegate to staff. I think that some facades are catching up with others, but I have confidence in the team and staff to be able to iron those out. So, with that, we need a motion to move this forward.
With conditions?
Yes.
Yeah.
Fine.
Oh, it's up to whoever's gonna make the motion.
Would you like to make the motion, or would you?
I will make the
Okay.
So this will be a final approval with conditions. Move to grant a certificate of appropriateness for the drawings and documents presented at this public hearing in BLC 19146 for the property located at 1402 19th Street and 1806 East 3rd Avenue with the following conditions. That the applicant return to staff with the following issues worked out. The head height between the two buildings will need further looking at, and in the infill on the north facade, where more square footage will be required and more units. We'll take that back to staff as well. Were there any others?
Signage. Signage.
Oh, and the applicant will work with staff on signage. Because based on the finding of fact, the proposed project is consistent with the Ybor City Design Guidelines and the Secretary of Interior.
We have a motion.
I'll second, and I'd like to add some additional amendments. That would be that the applicant work with staff to provide final drawings and solutions for, on the historic structure, wood or wood-clad or a hybrid product for all the doors, windows, and storefronts. That this project continue to seek resolution of the encroachments with the appropriate city departments. And also, we need to condition this on approval of city council for the previous motion.
Okay. We have a motion with a second with amendments. Do you accept the amendments?
Yes, I accept all of them.
Okay, we have a couple motions. Does the applicant understand the motion in place and the conditions that are attached to it?
Yes, I
Do
do.
you agree with them?
I do.
Okay.
And one question, Mr. Chairman, the applicant had asked to have the opportunity to work with staff on the fencing details as they evolve, so I don't know if you'd like to add that to your motion.
So amended. Do you accept?
I would accept that amendment.
Okay. Do you accept?
Yes.
Okay. Very good. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you very much.
Do all right?
Anybody need a break?
Good morning, Commissioners. Ron Vila, I'm staff of Historic Preservation. Moving to the next case, which is BLC 19-123 for the address of 2601 East 12th Avenue. Currently, there's a non-contributing structure that was constructed in 1950. The request in front of you this morning is an addition to that structure and site improvements. On this photo essay, I'm going to start with the vicinity map to show the approximate location. It is indicated by the arrow. It's toward the eastern boundary of the Ybor City District. 22nd is here, so it's east of 22nd, and it's north of 7th Avenue. You see the interstate. It's just below the interstate, south of the interstate. This is a Sanborn from 1929. Shows that this is a corner parcel on the corner of 12th Avenue and 26th Street. There is an alley that runs east-west to the south of the subject site. These structures have all been removed. This is the aerial showing you the location once again, corner parcel, 26th Street and 12th Avenue. You see the vegetation flanking the property. Natural Resources has looked at this and has granted the removal of some of these trees that are in the process of being removed as we speak. And they're indicated on the site plan. This is the non-contributing structure. Currently houses a place of worship. This is the front elevation. This is the north elevation. Minimal articulation and overhangs. This is the front elevation. As you go around to the east elevation, once again, you see a series of just single windows. It has a stucco facade. To the east of the structure, you have this vacant land that abuts the structure that will be used for parking. This is the street elevation, which is on 26th. See a little addition towards the rear that will be removed, and the addition will be in this approximate location. This is looking at that rear elevation and the west elevation. This is looking down 12th Avenue. This is back into the neighborhood. Subject site is to the right. Turning around and looking back towards 26th Street. Subject site is over here. Tees into it. There's a city park. Which is here. And then a series of non-contributing structures that surround the property. At this time, I have the agent, Ms. Savoy, address the board.
Good morning. Erica Savoy, 9606 North Conachusett Road, Tampa, Florida, 33617. Okay, right here is the existing site plan, the proposed site plan. Oh, I'm sorry. Better? Okay. Right here is the proposed site plan where it was required for 10 parking spots, which we met, 10 parking spots. We have the sidewalks that we was requesting to have, which is going around the sidewalks. We have wooden fence going around the property. The elevation to the proposed property is going to be attached to the existing, the same asphalt shingles, the same tie-in. The window is going to match to the existing. The same run we have here. There's just the elevations right here. The wall sections, how it's going to be here. We have the shingles. We have the aluminum facial, the soffit. Stucco is going to be the same as the existing. The steel. We have the block ground level matching to what the existing is. And then the square footage of the proposed, we're asking is 1,200 square feet. We have the AC unit that was in the front is going to be moved to the back of the building. And then the garbage pickup waste is going to be on the side, towards 26th Street, on the side here, wooded in. If there's any other questions.
Commissioners, in working with the agent, staff feels that this application is consistent with the Ybor City Design Guidelines. There was additional information that, in working with her architect, he had sent me yesterday, and in working with Ms. Savoy as well. The conditions on page 3 is that the scoring of all the concrete to be historically correct. And this site plan is a little more detailed than what she presented, but you see the apron here and then the scoring pattern to break up the monolithic pour. This surface parking lot meets Ybor City's surface standards with the fencing around it. We had asked for them to remove the vinyl PVC fencing and to incorporate wood fencing at the perimeter of the parking area. And then as an alternative, for budgetary reasons or sensitivity to the residential community that it interfaces with, instead of putting concrete in the parking stalls, as I indicated on the last project, that the throat has to be a hard surface, and then landscaping turf can be an option, so that could be a modification as we move forward to permitting. So this is the primary structure here, and this is the addition as they spoke about. They sent additional information as far as the color samples. We have a selection, color palette in our office that is more defined than what this illustrates here. When you copy what we have in the office, it doesn't transfer to the printed copy. So what we request is that they put samples on site for us, and then we could move forward at that time. The fencing around the site, these are picket, 4-foot high picket fencing, wood that meets the surface standards. There's a portion of the fencing that abuts the alley, that's a 6-foot high board on board. The lighting, since this is a commercial use, levers are required to meet code. And then the windows themselves, this is a vinyl window, this is a non-contributing structure, and indicated on their drawings is a 1/1, so the grill pattern won't be reflected. That concludes my portion of this. If I can answer any questions, I'm available. Yes, sir.
Just want a clarification, because the first drawing that we were shown showed a 4-foot PVC fencing along the exterior of the property. You're saying that it just needs to be a wood picket fence as shown instead of PVC, but that fencing is allowed?
Staff is requiring that the PVC is eliminated and the incorporation of the wood fencing.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Anybody from the public to speak for or against this project? I don't see anybody. Everybody left with the last one. So we'll ask questions regarding the project.
No, no questions.
I have no questions, thank you.
No questions.
I have a question. On the floor plan of the addition, if we can see that on the overhead again.
It disappeared?
It disappeared.
Yeah.
Let's see, if you can go to the actual proposed floor plan. Okay. In this location here, I see that the existing building is hatched. Looks like you've got a couple existing restrooms or a bump out there that is going to be retained on the existing structure. My question, and just the only thing that catches my eye is the front door of this new addition and how the column and kind of the framing of that new entry is kind of off to the side and hidden behind that back wall. It might be an opportunity to maybe scoot that over a little bit. It's the one thing that catches my eye in the plan as you would want to set up because that's going to be, looks like the front door for the social hall.
Correct.
It looks like it's pushed over in the corner a little bit, and it doesn't have to defer to a secondary portion of an existing building. So you could make it a little bit more special if you wanted.
Okay.
Maybe switch that in the other window so you have a front
Okay.
door. I know you have a sidewalk going straight to it. That's the only thing that catches my eye. I appreciate your presentation.
Okay.
And with that, I mean, you understand what I'm
Yes.
asking for there or suggesting. I think that we can close the public hearing and discuss the case and make a motion. Any,
No comments.
I don't know, yeah, thank you.
No comments.
No comments.
okay. Well, I appreciate you working with staff to push the project forward, and thank you for coming here today to present it. We appreciate it. So with that, I think we can make a variance and move the project forward. Or, I'm sorry, make a motion. I read the word variance. You don't need a variance.
I'm happy to make a motion if no one else would like to. So this is move to grant a certificate of appropriateness for the drawings and documents presented at this public hearing in BLC 19-123 for the property located at 2611 East 12th Avenue for new construction, because based on the finding of facts, the proposed project is consistent with the Ybor City Design Guidelines. And with the following amendments, that the applicant work with staff to resolve the following: the placement and door surround for the new opening, that the applicant work with staff to finalize the scoring on all of the surface parking lot being proposed, that the applicant be allowed to explore the use of turf or turf blocks in the parking, that the applicant use wood fencing as discussed at the public hearing along all perimeters of the project, and that the final paint samples be approved by staff.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Do you understand the conditions that are attached to the approval that you're receiving today?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, just a point of clarification, I think when Mr. Gelatz made the motion, he made reference to 2611 as the street number. It's 2601.
Oh, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thanks for the clarification. Didn't want you to have to move.
And
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second. We have a clarification for the address, and we have agent understanding and acceptance of the conditions that are attached to the approval. So, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope. Motion passes. Thank you.
Moving on to the next agenda item, which is BLC 20-17. This is for the address of 1701 East Palm Avenue. The request is the proposed installation of a small wireless facility on the Frontier replacement utility poles. This is a kind of a unique request. Just to show the density and the fabric. In 1929, this is on 17th Street and Palm Avenue, which was 10th Avenue back in the day. You see the housing stock that supported the cigar industry. Then today, the overhead shot, you have the Hilton here, you have OLPH Catholic Church, you have parking, surface parking on the northwest, and then you have some of the satellite site for the HCC campus in Ybor City. Wanted to show the environment that are surrounding in these corners. Here you have, a wooden pole. You have stop signs that have the fluted black columns. You have the base, and you have some representation of some other poles. This is looking down Palm Avenue and 17th Street. You have an HCC 5-globe inspired light. You have a concrete pole. You have a wood pole. This is the pole that we're talking about this morning. is an undersized wooden pole. This is looking back at the OLPH site. This is Palm Avenue and 17th here. Just wanted to show from a distance all the vertical elements in that area. Once again, on this corner, you see the incorporation of, you know, the wooden poles, then the black to incorporate into the vision plan of Ybor City. This is looking down Palm Avenue. You see the higher lines, and just stepping back to conclude, you have a street shot. This is Palm Avenue looking to the west across 17th Street, and you see a series of poles in that area. At this time, I'll have Mr. Fernandez address the board.
Good morning, Commissioners. Dennis Fernandez, Architecture Review and Historic Preservation Manager. Wanted to just give you a little bit of background on this specific request and how it somewhat folds in to future requests that the staff will be managing. The Florida State Legislature a couple years ago passed legislation enabling small wireless installations to be added in cities throughout the state in a truncated review process. The cities were given an opportunity to create ordinances that affect the placement and appearance of these installations. At that time, I collaborated with the city's legal department and urban design department and established some parameters for installation within the historic districts, particularly within Ybor City's historic district. That section is under Chapter 22, Section 328 of the city's Code of Ordinances. And I just want to review what the approach is with these facilities. And then the presentation will kind of go into deeper detail on what the specific request is this morning. So within the Ybor City Historic District, the code somewhat introduces the fact that it is a unique and important historic resource for the city of Tampa and the nation as a whole, being a National Historic Landmark District. When the small-scale wireless installations are going in as a new pole, a brand new pole, there is a requirement that the installer use a metal fluted pole not to exceed a 12-inch diameter and having a decorative fluted base. That would be a Tico Franklin model or a design equivalent, which is given as an option. No lighting is to be affixed to the pole unless otherwise approved through a certificate of appropriateness process. The pole base and height shall have less than 24 inches, shall be less than 24 inches from grade. The pole base, antennas, housing, components, and all attachments there furnished would have to, there's a color spec that essentially is the equivalent of what the black color is on the Ybor City 5 globe lights. So they would have to be painted that particular color. And then all equipment, and I'm paraphrasing, that's attached to the pole. There's housings and receivers and whatnot that you'll see in just a moment. That would also have to be within the same color coordinated vocabulary. So that's just dealing with a new pole. So it's essentially a metal pole, black, with black equipment affixed to it. What we're dealing with today is when there's co-location on existing poles, and this goes into being affixed on buildings as well, but for the purpose of today's discussion, we're talking about the co-location on existing poles. So that's where there is a pole that's already existing, and that pole is going to be utilized to accommodate the equipment. So these small wireless facilities, these electric meters, disconnect switches, wires, cables, and conduit, then refers back to a different section of the code that requires that they be stealth in design. So stealth in design means essentially that the pole and the equipment somewhat are aesthetically compatible in color. So So what we're seeing today is one particular pole that is being looked at, but due to time constraints in the review process that's been handed down to the local municipalities through the state, those time constraints don't allow for every single pole to come back through this process. There's a 45-day limit from submission to approval that's required, and that's with all reviewing agencies. That extends beyond our normal time frame. So your decision today will essentially become the prototype for what the staff would approve subsequently with other co-located poles. The new poles will still fit into what I described with the metal fluted block, but these co-locations where they're utilizing an existing pole, sometimes that pole is replaced, but it's an existing pole in the same location. We would look at those administratively, and the decision that you hand down today, we will apply that same design to those poles throughout the Ybor City Historic District. So with that, I'll have the agents come up, and they're going to provide you with a presentation, and then for further discussion afterwards, I'll be available. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members, Mr. Vila, and Mr. Fernandez. My name is Kerry Burrows, and I work for Verizon Corporation. My role with the company is I'm a direct employee consultant. So my background ventures across radio frequency engineering. It moves on into construction, and it deals with real estate and municipality. So I'd like to thank everyone here this morning for the time that you've allowed us to come in and discuss what Verizon is looking to do in the Ybor City area. The actual pole location that we're showing here today is one that was generated by need and necessity. So Verizon is one of the premier providers to the city of Tampa, their police department, EME services, and the likes. So this particular location in Ybor City came up on what we would consider in the radio frequency world and our network as a triggering site. So in the event of things like the Outback Parade, the Gasparilla, any events, and even normally the actual usefulness of the Verizon technology, this is an area where we detected that there was an absolute need for the actual coverage to be enhanced. So what this location will do is it'll enhance the coverage probably most and foremost for city officials, police department, EME services. Because now what's happening is a lot of these departments have gone to data transmissions back and forth, a lot of streaming of information, even the ambulances, okay? Those ambulance services that they're transmitting information back and forth to the hospitals. So this location with Verizon is tied directly into our network. So what's unique about this particular site is there was an existing Frontier pole on the exact corner where we needed this location. So what we did was we reached out to Frontier, who is a fiber provider. And when I first went down to Ybor City, they were not a fiber provider that the YCDC looked very favorably on. And I made a commitment to the YCDC group to bring Frontier in and start to clean up some of the problems that they had. And that actually transpired within 3 days of me meeting with the YCDC. So with Frontier being an ex-Verizon wireless commodity and now being a separate entity within itself, it allowed me a little bit of flexibility to go in and get some things done. So what brings me here today is that this particular pole was submitted to the City of Tampa. The City of Tampa, as indicated, has a 60-day state window. I believe that our time frame with them has been about 9 months. So what Verizon was doing in a lot of these situations was coming in and saying, look, we want to be a good neighbor, we want to talk to everybody, and we want to bring into the community not what is only needed, but is accepted by the neighborhood. So we had a number of meetings with the YCDC and got very favorable feedback from the entire community down there. What has me here specifically today is the ordinance and the way it affects the equipment that we're putting on these poles. It goes without saying right off the bat, if I may, I believe Mr. Fernandez addressed the black poles. So when you come with a new pole, right there's what you get when you're installing the new pole. That location is down in the city of Sarasota. We have 31 of those in their downtown district. And they actually have reached out to us, and we have about another 30 planned to go in there through the course of next year. What's happened here with the wood pole with the City of Tampa was the City of Tampa came back with a planning request of a brown fixtures on a wood pole. Now, on the surface, oh, I talk generally pretty loud. I didn't think I would need this. On the surface, what you see is brown equipment on a somewhat brown colored pole. The issue with this is we all know that these poles weather over time, and my recommendation throughout the entire state was to go with the black equipment. So the black equipment, specifically in Ybor City, everything down there is highlighted and done in decorative black. So what we were looking at was making the cabinet and all of our ancillary equipment, along with our antennas, black on the pole. Now, understanding that this pole is going to be more to a weathered gray, I believe that when you take an area where you would have a number of black street signs, where you have, there's buildings down there that have the architectural black wrought iron and things like that. This would blend in, I think, much more than what the brown would or even the gray. So what I'm here today is to ask if, in the event that everybody approves this particular design, we could go and reach back to the City of Tampa. The City of Tampa has already approved this. It's sitting waiting for permit based on, of course, the final decision on your part. And at this time, I believe that's all I really need to say further, unless there's any questions you all might have.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. Ron Vila, staff with Historic Preservation. This application adheres to the process delineated in the Section 22-328 of the City of Tampa Code of Ordinances. Dennis went thoroughly through the ordinance. We could address that again. This is, as I stated, kind of a unique situation. The agent presented you with multiple selections, but he was leaning towards the one with the replacement pole with the black equipment to match the environment. So that's the request in front of you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. We have the opportunity for public comment. Don't know if we have people here that are here to address this particular case. Doesn't seem to be. So we can have commissioners ask questions of this particular application.
I do have a question. These poles look actually larger than the existing poles. Is that correct?
So no pole that we install can be any higher than the existing pole within 500 feet. Now, this particular pole is a shorter, worn-out pole that they were actually looking at replacing, but state law prohibits us from putting any pole in that's higher than the highest pole within 500 feet.
Okay. Well, if that pole's being replaced, why wouldn't it be considered a new pole and we'd get something more like you saw in Sarasota?
Well, because Frontier does not put metal poles in anywhere. Their business model does not allow for that, and their replacement poles are wood. What they're doing is they're replacing what they call a like for like. If we were replacing it with a metal pole, then it would be considered a new pole installation because it's not a like for like, but Frontier does not do that. And what we're trying to do is limit what would be considered new pole ads.
Okay. So we would never be seeing that model that you showed from Sarasota within the.
Yes, in fact, do I have the Note 7? Let me do this. I think I have it over here, Mike. I don't have papers. I have the papers here. Okay. I actually have a location. I don't have the. I think it's in your bag, maybe. We have an actual location down there where we do have. It would be our Node 7, where it is a black pole. Okay. So yes, any of the future sites that we are looking to do in Ybor City, there you go. See, thank you, Mike. This is a photo sim, existing street down there in Ybor, and that one there is the black metal pole, and as you can see, you got the black sign, and you've got the black wrought iron railing on the structure to the right. So we actually prefer to put the black metal poles in, but it also makes sense if there's an existing pole there that you put the same pole in, so it's not a net add.
Okay. Helpful, thank you.
Okay, so there's the pole, there's the equipment, right? And
yes, sir.
In this particular case, we're trying to decide what the color palette of the devices would be on an existing wood pole. I agree, we all like the black on black new metal poles, but I guess my question to you is, in the event that that existing pole got hit by a car and you had to replace it, or is the equipment that you have able to be mounted on a new black pole and be reused? Are we making a choice there too for a future installation of this?
No. So, if I may, since this is a Frontier pole, it would be replaced with another wood pole, because Frontier they don't use metal poles. Everything that they use are wood in nature. All right. So, and if it's a new metal pole that had been placed and it had been hit, then it would be replaced with another new metal pole.
Right.
So part of what we're doing where we go in with, and I want to make sure that I'm allowing you all to continue to see that. All right. Where you see this, that's an actual installation. That's not a photo sim. All right. So that's exactly how that pole looks. We have locations like that in front of multi-million-dollar properties. So we believe that we're doing the right thing as we're installing them. But if that pole were to be hit and damaged, all right, it would be replaced with a black metal pole. But the wood ones would be replaced with wood.
I guess the flip side of my question is, if we chose something that wasn't black and you had to reuse it, or would you be in a position where you'd ever reuse a different color? Or would we always be going back new with black on black?
No, so if you tell us today that this location is black, it's black, it remains black. It is, that this location is part of our approval process from the city of Tampa to place this pole in the right of way.
Okay.
So even if this pole was hit wood, okay, and the wood pole was going away at some time, we would still have to go back through and say, can you now approve our black metal pole there?
Okay,
It's just the way the state law is written.
right. And so this is, being a Verizon pole, you're adding on to it, and will we ever see the approvals for the black on black pole as new, or is that a different prototype to establish in the future?
Dennis Fernandez. As long as they are meeting the code and the right-of-way division determines that it can be placed in the right-of-way, a new pole, then those would not come to you. That would be an administrative.
We have that squared away.
Right.
Okay. Do we have the color samples? Because I think that we have what? We have obviously the black, the brown, and a silver. Do we have the options?
To look.
Yeah, did you bring actual physical samples?
No, I did not bring actual equipment with me. The cabinets do come in a gray and they come in a black. If you go to a brown, they get painted. The shrouds come in a black and they come in a gray. So if that shroud needs painted, you have to paint it brown. So the other thing is, that's why we also lean towards the black as well. And not only is it blending in with the aesthetics of Ybor City, but they are part of what is manufactured. So in other words, these are baked on, painted colors.
Right. And the silver isn't?
The gray is.
The gray.
Yes,
Yeah.
the gray is.
Okay, so-
The brown is not. The brown is painted.
Right. But the brown's a non-starter.
So I have a little experience with the color section. So the black, I think everyone would be, the black spec was provided to the providers, and that's what's been used on street furniture throughout the district. So we know that. The brown, I believe, is referred to as National Park brown. So it's when you go to a national park, like what would be the National Historic Landmark District, that's the brown that the National Park Service uses on their objects. The gray, I think, is more of an industry gray that they use. So he wanted to provide, kind of the entire palette for you today, which I encouraged.
Okay. Yeah, please.
Does staff have an opinion after working through this process? Is there one that sort of meets?
Have you seen it installed in gray?
I have not seen the brown installed. I think a gray recently went in outside of the historic district, but I'm not sure if that was a Verizon pole or not. But I mean, when staff initially met, we thought for simplicity and somewhat compatibility that the black equipment would be what's most commonly recognized within the historic district. That being said, I think if you ask a dozen people, you'll probably get 13 different opinions on it. So, it's here before you, and we'll go the direction that you provide us this morning.
All right, if I may, to answer further on that question, I'll provide what did you indicate brown was the eyesore?
Sir, if you'll use
Yeah.
the microphone every time you step away from the podium.
All right, this is a rural area location where this is an actual installation, and that's what your brown looks like there.
On the right, is that the gray? Or is that before and after on those? Oh, that's the backside of it?
Yes.
Oh, same pole,
That's
different.
the same pole, just two different angles.
Okay. Okay. And we don't have an example of the gray. Okay. Well, I guess we can close the public hearing since we've had such good conversation and discuss the case.
Yeah, no comments.
I have no discussion.
I'm leaning towards the black. Is this discussion?
This is discussion.
Oh, yeah. I've seen poles in so many different kind of weathered conditions that it is philosophically a little bit difficult to understand what's the best way to go here. But I do think that perhaps just for the sake of consistency and for the sake of letting these stand out as improvements to the historic district, that black would be perhaps what I would be voting for.
Yeah, I would be the same. I like the black much better than all of the other options, and I think it blends in more. I wish that we could replace the wood poles with the metal, but I understand that they're two different owners, different business models.
Okay, I'll be a contrarian. I think that I think that the black on the wood pole is going to stand out a whole bunch as over time as the pole patinas and goes to gray. I think the black is, as a metal, is something that you want to have come to the ground typically in a fence or a light post or something like that. And I think that by putting them all over poles that eventually, I got to imagine that wood poles are going to go away at some point. So I don't mind having, establishing a prototype here that is to say, hey, we know we've got old infrastructure, we know we've got gray poles, we know it's going to turn a certain color. Let's just make that gray, and one day that will go away. And we're going to, do we know, hang on, I'm going to have to open up. The question I have in mind is, how many new poles are we getting in Ybor versus how many old poles are we going to be reusing? And if we've got 20 new poles and 4 old poles, I'd be tempted to let the new poles be black and the old poles go to the gray, so they just go out of the equation rather than trying to put black on everything throughout the district. So that's my concern, or 2 cents at least on the. Yeah. And keep in mind, once we pass whatever it is, they're going to roll with however many that they have through the district, and then we're going to, whatever the outcome of that is, we're not going to have a chance to go back to it.
Mm-hmm.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, just a point of clarification, given some of the discussion, Section 22-328 of the code, which addresses this item, does distinguish between installation of new poles and replacement of existing poles. So while the discussion from the applicant has been based upon the ownership and which entity installs the metal poles and which one replaces the wood poles with wood, that is less relevant for your discussion. What is relevant is the code criteria, and where we are replacing poles, and this is considered a replacement even though it will be a new pole. It's still replacing an existing pole. This is where your standard of review is to address the design and what would be stealth in nature. So I just wanted to clarify that because there was discussion about the ownership and how that was triggering the design. That's not for your consideration, right. Really. Okay. Our code is for existing poles that are being replaced. How do you address the design so that it is stealth in nature? Okay.
Can we as a board ask that what be installed, and then we revisit our final decision? Because these are photo simulations, and it is sort of difficult, especially since we don't have any color samples.
Yeah, and this is a like for like, right? So where an existing pole is wood, the owner-operator gets to go back in with wood because that's a fixed cost, essentially, and doesn't require improvement. So with that said, then there's probably only so many wood poles that there are in Ybor, because where we're adding new, we'll be going back in with the black. And if it's a stealth consideration, I think that going with something that is that matches the pole itself, rather than trying to tie in with the rest of the aesthetic of new stuff, is something that will that's a nuance I think that will help in this case. So, do we have any other questions to the applicant? I don't think we need to reopen the case.
You had mentioned perhaps it would help our decision-making if we knew how many of these might be showing up on existing poles. I don't know if that's something they can actually answer with any credibility at this point.
Do we know the answer to that? Because I'll reopen the public hearing for that testimony. Okay, I need a motion to reopen.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, we're open.
Thank you. We have 15 locations strategically placed throughout Ybor City. I believe at this time, 4 of the sites are co-locations on wood frontier poles. The other 11 are that design that you saw down in the downtown Sarasota.
Do you have those, there's a whole bunch of yellow pins on there. Do we know which ones are the wood?
All right. At this time, I'd like to introduce Mike Murphy. He's a national director with SMW Engineering.
How you doing? Mike Murphy, SMW.
You don't talk as loud as me. So.
How you doing today? Okay, so the sites in question, number 2 here is your wood pole. That is the one next to the hotel up here. Number 13, which is an existing pole with a lot of vegetation growing up to it that they're replacing. Number 14, which is on the backside of the IKEA. And number 10, which was a decrepit pole that was splintered and breaking apart.
And so those perimeter poles are the 4 wood poles that we're considering for this prototype consideration. The rest of them are all new black poles installed by you for the device.
That's correct.
Just a point of clarification, that the one that he referred to as the IKEA pole is outside the historic district, so
Right.
you actually think dealing with 3. Now, and also keep in mind
Can we compel
that
them to do the same thing? If
they-
we do great?
I think the city will
Okay.
accept any recommendations you have at this time. One thing to keep in mind is we are talking about the Verizon Frontier provider. There are other providers that may come into the marketplace and request similar requests.
Okay.
And if you request us to do gray
Again,
on-
sir, every time you speak when you're away from the podium, if you can use the microphone, and it's really for the viewing public. When you
Okay.
step away from the podium, they can't hear you.
My apologies. So if you tell us that you like gray on that particular wood pole, even if we're outside the historic district and we consider it part of the Ybor district to us, we're going to make it gray. So we're not going to do 3 grays and 1 black. That would not happen.
Okay.
All right?
That clarifies some stuff. Thank you very much. Did you have a question that you wanted to?
No, I think I got it answered.
Okay, I'm going to close it back down. Okay, so we're closed. I think that in terms of seeing the location where these things are and hearing the testimony that we've only got 4 of them that might be considered here, and as the ripple effect goes further, they might, whatever they do on the wood poles, they'll do the same. I think it's an opportunity to distinguish between the two, because as they go further, you're going to have this black Ybor look showing up in places that aren't Ybor. And so the net effect of that will be to dilute what we're trying to accomplish in the district. Where we have the new poles and the new receivers, obviously black, obviously an improvement, and obviously highlighting the district. Where we're at the perimeter of the district and starting to fade off into other areas, I'm a proponent of going with the gray and having it just be as stealth as possible.
I concur, based on the additional information.
I would agree.
If we have other providers come in and, you know, I think someone over here indicated that we may have other providers in the future, will we be evaluating their selection when they're ready to come in? Or will they follow this? Will they follow this recommendation?
In consultation with the city attorney's office, we believe that to be in line with the state legislation, we're not going to be able to facilitate a review for this board. This will be your opportunity to comment on it and we would apply that decision to all future applications.
Okay.
I think that makes it even clearer, because new pole, new stuff, black, existing pole that's gonna patina, gray, and then as the district gets built out, the black poles will emanate from the center of it, and the wood poles will ultimately go away. So I think that clears it up for me. So if there isn't any other discussion, we can get a motion and we can move it forward.
So the motion is for a certificate of appropriateness. This will be a final approval. Move to grant a certificate of appropriateness for the drawings and documents presented at this public hearing in BLC 20-17 for the property located at 1701 East Palm Avenue in Ybor City, because based on the finding of fact, the proposed project is consistent with the Ybor City guidelines of the City of Tampa for the following reasons. It also meets the Secretary of Interior standards. And for the record, what we've chosen is black. Right? No.
Well, that's your motion.
I'm trying to make them.
The consensus based on the discussion of the vocal commissioners was that we had decided based on the additional information about the location that we would consider the gray
On the wood.
on the wood.
poles.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, so, based on that discussion, we will have gray on the wood poles.
And all black on the new.
And all
We don't
black.
get, that's not part of this motion.
Oh, I'm
That,
sorry.
yeah,
I'm
that'll
sorry.
come later.
It's the specific instance here for replacement poles.
Replacement poles will be gray.
Okay, we have a motion with the color selection. Do we have a second?
Second that motion.
We have a second. We have a motion with the color selection. Does the applicant understand?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we did.
Thank you very much. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Any opposed? No? Okay. Thank you. Gray it is.
Good morning, Commissioners. Ron Vila. The last case reflected this morning, and before we get started, we need to do a swear-in. We had some new people come in. So everybody that wishes to testify, stand up and please raise your right hand. So the last case is BLC 20-19 for the address of 2201 North 15th Street. Currently, there is a contributing structure there that was constructed in approximately 1915. The request in front of you this morning is demolition of that contributing structure. On the overhead, I have a historic photo here. It was not dated, but just to show you the building in question, how it looked back in the day. You see a period car here, so you see it's probably right after it was built. And then you see a series of cottages to the north. So this is 11th Avenue here, and this is 15th Street heading to the north. This is a 1929 Sanborn map showing the brick structure, which is indicated with the red. Yellow indicates frame construction, so you see the density of the housing stock around it, and then the overhangs with the balcony and the secondary entrance, and then the two homes that were illustrated in the photo. Moving to the Sanborn map from 31, this is the skeleton Sanborn. It's not shaded in, but it still shows the corner of 11th Avenue and 15th Street. Here's the two-story structure, and then the two houses that are indicated in the photo. And then moving to the 1951 Sanborn map, which is in a clouded area, you see the two-story store that's on the corner, and then you see a abutting structure to the north that is part of the request in front of you this morning. That is also a contributing structure that's attached, and then a dwelling to the north. That dwelling has been removed, but I wanted to show you the series of the progression of that particular block. This is what we're looking at today. There's a shell left behind. The front facade is in brick, and then the other elevations are CMU, and the applicant will get into that. So you have the two-story contributing structure and then a one-story appendage to the north. This is just looking at the facade, looking from the north, looking to the south down 15th Street. This is the front facade, and moving around to the reconstruction with the CMU on the southern portion. This is looking from the vantage point from the north. This is the one-story structure here, and then you see the bracing on the two-story structure. This is the rear of the CMU. That was not part of the original structure. And just to conclude, I always like to show some street shots so you get a feeling of the environment. The structure is over here. Sense of place. This is looking down 15th Street to the north. You see the interstate in the background. And then to conclude, subject site here. This is 15th Street looking back into Palm Avenue and the commercial core of Ybor City, 7th Avenue. That concludes the photo presentation, and I'll have the owner and the agents address the board.
Thank you, Ron.
Good morning, everyone. I was sworn in. I'm Phil Girardi, GVZ Development LLC. I'm the managing partner for that group. It's me and two of my friends. I'm also the owner of Girardi Construction. Our office is located in Ybor City. Before we page through the burden of proof and some of our other stuff, I just wanted to tell you what an interesting journey this property has been for us. Interesting is one way to put it, but I've completed numerous historical renovations in Ybor at the Italian Club. We've done some major renovations where we've been able to save facades in different locations. We did that with the Steinberg building. We put balconies throughout 7th Avenue and got the approval process. That was as Girardi Construction. This project started out as Girardi Construction. I was working with a client to buy the property. There was a rendering at that time done by another architect. The deal fell through. The older Italian family from Ybor City had owned it for a long time. When the deal fell through, they were in a rush to close. They approached me about buying it. I got a couple partners together. We bought it in 2006 for $348,000. The due diligence started a little bit with the first client, but then after we bought it, we started to look into developing the property. One of the first problems we encountered was the rear wall of the property. Let me get this here for you. We have some aerials here that we took of the property. Somewhere here. There we go. This goes here. So these two walls were built in approximately 1996. They're CMU masonry. After we bought the property, we were approached by the owner in the rear that this wall was built on his property. So I have a survey, which I'll show you when we page through here. We had a survey at closing. The surveyor made a mistake. It showed everything in line. The neighbor comes very upset with me. After we bought it, we get a new survey. We're 4 inches on the property to the rear. Not to mention the footing that protrudes probably 16 inches onto his property. So we figure we're almost 2 feet on his property. So over the last 12 years, I've convinced them that whenever we do something, that wall has to come down. So that's the first problem that we encountered. That wall has to come down. This wall over here was built without any inspections or permits by the former owner in '96. Getting people to look at that wall, it's in pretty bad shape. It looked like it wasn't done with poor quality. The rebar looks like it's lacking. The grout looks like it's lacking. Without any inspections, that wall really needs to come down. I mean, it would have to be x-rayed. And to me, that's a newer wall that, to me, is not contributing, but that's a whole other story. So that became another issue. The center wall here is partly new, partly tried to be repaired by somebody. Again, no inspections on it. These two walls are solid brick. There's no CMU mortar or rebar backing them up. So they're just the old brick wall. And the mortar is failing pretty bad. It has been. It's pretty sandy. So as we got into this wall, that wall really would need to come down. If you go over to the left here, this structure was added when Ron said, I forget what year. Yeah. There was 2 casitas there. They were torn down and somebody added this structure. This wall was built and has no grout in it. It's cracked. And if you page through the pictures, it's just not feasible to save that. So the last part of it is this facade here, which is the main part of the picture that he showed you, this dark picture. It was the yellow house. It was a mafia-owned brothel and cafe downstairs. The history on it, there is history on it, but mostly bad, in my opinion. But that front wall, over the years, we did do drawings to rebuild this and try to put it back together. So we have drawings that we did to put new steel inside and put the project back together. But as we got into those exterior walls, all these problems kept presenting themselves. The front wall is braced and currently has major cracks in it. It always has. When you look at the pictures, there's steel braces put on it. The only way to possibly even save it would be to spend an absorbent amount of money, attempt to try to put a CMU wall behind it, drill through with diamond plates, and kind of pin it to that back wall. In doing so, we feel half the wall would probably fall. So you would have hardly anything left even after that expensive attempt. There's not much left of the wall. It's in really bad shape. And we just, everybody that I've done a lot of facade renovations. This one, I can't figure out how to save it. In closing, before I page through the binder, we've been attempting to try to do something with this property. It's been for sale since day one. Prices have gone up, obviously, with the possibility of the raise coming to town and things like that. But we've dealt with code enforcement as far as weeds and graffiti. We put a fence around it. There was an old oil tank on there we removed, there was an elevator pit we removed, so we cleaned up the property to try to work through it. We've had no offers, because now that we know the problems, we have to tell people that when you're selling it. So when they come in my office, you have to present the problems, and it's just not feasible to develop it with the problems on the property. If we get approval to demolish it, we plan on developing the property within a couple of years. We think that would happen pretty quick. It would simplify the process. So if we go, I guess, do I page you the binder now? The burden of proof. So this case, to me, is, a lot of the things in here are, not applicable, but we'll just start with section 1 AE. We do see no alternate to relocate this structure. It's just impossible to move that wall. The building structure cannot be retained on site in its condition right now. An attempt to try to save the wall, we feel, would fail due to the condition. Also, it's also a safety issue, but that's another issue. If we obtain approval, it would be impossible to relocate the structure. C, if we obtain approval to demolish this structure, we plan on developing the site in 2 years. To us, that the demolition is justified due to the logistics in saving the structure and the possibility of the wall failing. The probability is the wall wouldn't be saved in the end anyway. And there is a huge economic hardship, and that's why we feel like the property is impossible to develop. If you go to A, that's the cost to propose demolition. We have a demolition contractor lined up. We had our asbestos testing done, just in case we get approval, or if we do get approved. These are the bids we got. We have a demolition bid which we attached. We'll have to have a superintendent there. We already have a right-of-way permit that we've blocked off the sidewalk due to safety issues. So we have the right-of-way permit in place, and that gives you the total cost of the demolition. B is a letter from our architect and engineer talking about the structure and the building. They're both here for you guys cross-reference if you have any questions on the letter there. The next picture is the historical picture that Ron showed you. That shows the two casitas to the left, and the original structure was just that yellow house. The next picture is the survey that shows that wall on the rear property, on my neighbor's property. The difficulty with that. And there really is no other way to do that except for tear it down. And then if you go through, we have a bunch of pictures just showing you the condition of the front and where we stand today. We've been advertising on that building the whole time. And, you know, people have come into the office, but when you sit down and show them what is here, it's just difficult to make it, impossible to make it work. There's a rear shot of the rear wall that shows you it's on somebody else's property. A lot of pictures here. And you can see the two masonry walls pretty clear that were built without inspections or permits, and they're not brick walls, so they were built in '96, what I understand. There's a picture of the front balcony that's in pretty rough shape. There's pictures of the braces. And then there's one picture near the end of that that add-on addition to the left that shows those two places. And if you go near the back, it shows that center wall, which is this one. guess I should have done this with each picture, but this is the center wall. And people have tried to repair it. There's some wood bracing on here, but the mortar is literally falling out of it. And it's not like it's a brick veneer where you can go and chisel it out and fix it. The whole wall is brick. So you guys have the pictures. If you have any questions, we can go through that later. If you go to the next tab, C, it shows that we are the owner of the property, GBZ yellow. It shows the approximate market value on the city appraiser's office. Tab D gets into the cost to rehabilitate the building versus the value of the building when it's complete. This is where it really gets to be impossible to develop the property. The cost of the land to date with the $348,000, plus we already spent money for an architect to do the original drawings, plus we've started to go for a parking variance to get ready for this, to keep up with the lot. We're about $445,000 in on the lot. The cost to rehabilitate, remove, replace the exterior walls alone, by going by the lineal foot, would be approximately $750,000. And that's no guarantee that the front wall is even going to remain. And almost every expert thinks it won't. And if we did do the tieback system I discussed before, you'd have a series of plates along the whole front of the building trying to pin it back. If you could picture that, it would just really be a different thing. I have money in there to complete the interior, the shell and the interior, the permits, and to do the new drawings for the structure. So the whole cost to approximately to rehabilitate this structure would be almost $3 million. And I would think it would be more when you get into unforeseen things. The value of the building to complete, it shows you right now, even the going rate, and we've sold some lots lately, you'd probably get about $1.4 million if that building was built, which puts you over $1.5 million upside down. And again, I think it's going to be a lot higher than that. And that's why I think the property hasn't been able to be developed and sold. Tab E just gives you the property appraiser's value again, and it shows you when we bought the property and the history of the property. F is the property income producing, obviously not. We have no mortgage on the property. Tab G, no balance. And we have not had any appraisals in the last 2 years. We've never had an appraisal on the property. It's kind of impossible to do at this point. The next tab, I, shows you some of our marketing that we've had. These flyers are in our office, and we have been trying to sell it. The price went up from $500 to $700 a couple of years ago when things got a little hotter in Ybor. J, we've had no assessments on the property. K shows my taxes that we pay in the city. And L shows the LLC company that owns the property. And I was trying to make this as short and sweet as possible, but in closing, when we first bought the property, we attempted to meet with Della Costa, who was the manager of the Barrio at that point. When we bought it, we knew it was contributing, but as we looked at it, it came harder and harder to believe it was contributing. When we met with Dell, he said it was contributing, and we tried to go that route. In hindsight, I wish we would have tried to do something different earlier, because the property has sat there and been a money drain instead of, something making money for us. So that's all I really have. if you guys have any questions, I'm here, obviously.
Thank you for your presentation.
Commissioners, Ron Vila, staff's finding that this application is complete with Chapter 2799. There's two sections. The first section is the burden of proof. There's 5 criteria questions associated with that. And then the second part is the economic hardship, and there's 13 criteria questions that he went systematically through that. Initially, he gave you an overview, and then he addressed each of those items. He does have his professionals here. They entered their professional opinion into the record, into that report that you have there, and they're here to answer any questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. We have the opportunity for public comment. If there's any member of the public to speak on this project, seeing none, we can entertain questions from the commissioners.
No questions.
I have no questions.
I do have a question. Your presentation, very thorough, but really addressed what's the remnants of the building. I'm looking at the aerial view that you presented, and I'm looking at the original Sandburg map, and I'm just curious. To the south appears to be, is that brick surface what remains of what used to be 11th Avenue North?
Correct.
Okay.
And-
And if you could speak to your plans about
that
portion of the project as far as you're concerned.
That has been closed, and we own half of that. The accounting firm next door owns half of it. So 11th Avenue is closed. That's always going to remain. In our plans, there's a granite curve there, actually. So that would be, in the plans we had before, there would be 2 or 3 parking spots there, but neither one of us can develop it. And that is 11th Avenue. If you go, this is the building, then there was the two casitas here. The one casita's gone, and the other casita was replaced by that.
So the fencing doesn't, on the aerial, doesn't represent the property line. It's actually the middle of the bricks.
It splits right here. He owns the other one. Him and I both have a key to the gate.
Okay.
Because we both maintain it.
And if you were to receive a demolition permit, it's just, we're talking about just the portion of the building.
Yes.
Not that historic
Yep.
feature.
I should have been clear. Yes, it's just this. No curbs or brick or sidewalk.
And I don't know if I can ask this, in going forward, and they said they were gonna be redeveloping, will you be able to use any pieces or portions of that old building in your new redevelopment? Have you considered that yet?
That's what we tried to do for 14 years. It's just impossible.
I mean, not as it stands today, I
Oh.
don't know.
I mean, one train of thought was to take the brick and save it from the front wall and pile it up and use it as a brick veneer. We're not sure there's enough of it,
Yeah.
but, you know, with the new project, you could use some of it as an accent somewhere. I've done that before.
Yeah, something along that line. There's a lot of history in that building, as
Yeah.
you indicated. Not all of it's good, but.
No,
as
I
you
know there
indicated.
is. That's why I said history first, before I said
Yeah.
whether it was good or bad.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's not a lot of character defining features left.
There really aren't, and
Perhaps
so I don't
the-
know if they can be creative.
The railing on the Juliet balcony, but it doesn't even appear to be in that great a condition. And it would be fairly easy to replicate.
Yeah, that's true.
If they chose to.
In terms of the scale or the development option that you're going to pursue, have you thought about the scale of the project that you would do in the future?
No, I mean, obviously, we'd have to be in here. No, I mean, we would obviously need some parking. We would still like to keep some parking. You would be able to get some kind of variance to support the whole building, but it would be a 2-story structure, probably taking the whole area up.
Similar to what we see there?
Right.
Okay, so we could potentially indicate a retention of massing and scale of the building as part of the demo? We can't hold it contingent?
No, the process would be that you're evaluating this request on the merits of his application.
Right, and we don't
And
have
then he would just have to adhere to the design standards and zoning requirements for the new construction when he comes in at that time. You could make a condition about attempting to salvage any of the materials, that could be a condition, but having that extend through to a new project wouldn't be allowed.
Right, but as part of, hypothetically, as part of the new project, we would see the history of the site and see these pictures again of the original.
Right.
And just while we have you up there, the remnant of the street, how protected is that within the scope of the project?
Well, the street is protected under the Brick Street ordinance, even though it's been vacated. If it were removed, the brick would have to be palletized and returned to the city under the ordinance. But I think that they would probably use that to access the parking. In the site development talks that we've had, it has value to remain there even though it's not a public right-of-way.
Since the demolition permit is tied to the historic aspects of the site, can we condition that portion of the brick road and the historic granite remain?
Sure, you can do that.
Yeah, and there's a granite curb there too,
Right.
so we would definitely keep it, but we can promise to keep it. Whatever you want.
Thank you, promise.
It's been a long road.
Okay, I don't have any other questions, so I think that with that, we'll close the public hearing. Any further discussion?
No.
Any further discussion? Okay, then, I will add one point to the record on this case. I would like to state that 31 years plus ago, I met my wife on the dance floor in that building, so there is some positive history. So
I've heard a lot. I mean, people are calling about wanting some of the brick.
Yeah.
Because they got notices in the neighborhood, so.
I have some pieces of the dance floor.
I'm sure you do. That's
It
good.
wasn't trespassing, I swear. Back then, it was the Impulse. So that was a long time ago. So that's
Appreciate
positive
that.
history there. Thank you.
Appreciate your
indulging
time
that.
today.
Yeah. We need a motion.
I will move to grant a certificate of appropriateness to demolish the BLC case number 20-19. 2019 for the property located at 2201 North 15th Street. It's the demolition of a contributing structure, in such as the agent has presented material here at the public hearing to satisfy the requirement of Chapter 27-27, Section 27-99, City of Tampa Code of Ordinance, with the following conditions: that the applicant attempt to save any redeeming historical features of the building as deemed appropriate with staff, and that that the applicant retain the remnants of the historic street and granite curbing located within the boundaries of the site.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
You have a motion and a second. We have a motion with some conditions that you've been participating with. Do you understand and agree to them?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I abstain.
One abstention.
Okay, typically, if a commissioner is abstaining from a vote, they have previously declared a conflict of interest as defined by state law. And at the beginning of today's meeting, I asked if any of the commissioners had a conflict of interest, and none were disclosed. So,
No, I have no conflict of interest. I have a conflict of conscience.
well, sadly, our Florida statutes don't address that situation, and unless you have a conflict of interest or can't make a decision based upon the evidence before you, if you can't be impartial, then commissioners are required to vote.
I vote aye.
Thank you.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And seeing no further business, we'll adjourn. And save some of the dance floor for me. Yeah. We are adjourned.